Hello and welcome to the Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Baumeister. On the pod today is my good buddy, Rob Mottram. Rob is a Germanist, and not just in the sense of being a Germophile like myself, but someone who actually studies German literature and the German language. Rob is a visiting assistant professor in German studies at Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. And Rob and I talked about a lot of interesting topics of common overlap between us, including the relationship between philosophy and literature, the magic of literature, novels, the history of novels, the power of novels and of an emotional description in them, the boundary between philosophy and religion and other forms of thinking in the past and in our society. And we had, or touched on a number of other things as well along the way that you're not going to want to miss. So on this episode of Deadbeat Philosophy, today with Rob Mottram. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing all right. Good to see you.
All right. We're talking on a Sunday, and for you, it's still, it's like midday, and for me, it's night, and everybody's asleep, and it's quiet here. Things. What's going on midday in Walla Walla on the Sunday?
Everything, man. Everything's going on. People are coming out of church. It's getting crazy out there. Stay off the streets.
Okay.
No,
Yes.
it's stunning. It's a gray, typical. It's more like a Pacific Northwest day, although we're on the dry side of the mountains. It's just
yes.
a dark, free Sunday. Good time to put on some Velvet Underground, read a book.
Great. No, that sounds like perfect book weather and like a book vibe. Sometimes there's just got to be like the right combination of things in the environment in order to really feel at ease enough to open up a book and to commit yourself a bit to it. So
I find that I open books when I'm not feeling at ease.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. And it helps put you at greater ease?
Sometimes they just keep me up. But I think that one of the main reasons I read is so I don't have to think my own thoughts. That's my main motivation for reading. It's actually from an Eric Rohmer movie. Did you ever watch those 6 Moral Tales?
No, not yet.
We had talked about them before. So this is a French director, and he came out with like 6 movies, and some of them are rather short, some of them are full length. And yeah, 6 Moral Tales, and one of them is La Collectionneuse, so like the collector.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a character in that movie who takes a work of, I think it's Rousseau, and they're in some beautiful Mediterranean setting, and he takes the book and he goes under a tree to read, and his friend, they're all embroiled in some love triangle, and his friend's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you leaving to read that book right now?" Because who reads, right? And he said, "I don't want to have to think my own thoughts." And that just always stuck with me. So when I don't want to think my own thoughts, then I open up a book, and then I can be captured by something or somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I like that. And that makes me think, well, because, you come at these issues, at least on a professionally, maybe personally, we might have a lot more in common, but in terms of professional disciplines, you come at the perspective of books more in terms of literature. I'd say maybe, and maybe me and books in terms of philosophy, but I feel the same way about opening books of either of those genres. And maybe, there's actually not that much of a distinction there. And I know you also have many toes in the philosophical world and the history of philosophy. So maybe let me ask you, Rob, just to introduce yourself to us, like as a thinker and as a reader, tell us what's the essence of Rob in that regard,
Apparently thinking other people's thoughts. So, we both have these advanced degrees in my case, literature, and your case, philosophy. And we met at the University of Oregon, where we were both pursuing these professional studies. Mm-hmm. And I identify with that comment you made about maybe there's not a huge distinction between literature and philosophy, although that's a largely romantic claim to make. But yeah, literature remains
to bring them together. That's kind of a romantic gesture.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. To read literature as philosophy and philosophy as literature,
Mm-hmm.
and to sort of, you know, at least at least as a thought experiment, to pretend like there's not a difference. Although
Mm-hmm.
I like running that experiment that just says maybe there isn't a difference, because there's
Mm-hmm.
epistemological concerns in literature, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's this more emotional or narrative
Mm-hmm.
concern that can't help but creep up in philosophy, including the
Mm-hmm.
story that a philosophy book
Mm-hmm.
will tell.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're very much related.
We were talking about philosophy and literature,
Okay.
and you introduced the idea that maybe there isn't a distinction between them, or let's entertain the idea that there's not. And I agree with that and like that a lot. But then I do also recognize that there are some in both fields that would entertain the opposite. So there's certainly like philosophers who are real gatekeepy about what philosophy is, and they're like, no, only we do it, you know. And like if you write a novel, or if you're writing fiction or poetry or these kind of genres that are usually seen as literature and not philosophy, at least, but that's itself a historical invention, you know. I mean, Plato wrote literature. He wrote these dialogues of characters talking with each other with things happening.
Mhm.
But still, there are, maybe there's even like, I don't know, maybe like bigot is too strong of a word, but they're like bigots in both sides. Like the philosophers don't want to associate with those literary guys, and the literature guys. There are some who, you know, I think have the same bigotry but reversed. So, what do you say to like skeptics who would say no, they are distinct? Like Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, for instance, some like archetypical philosophical text that's not literary. And then in flipping the coin to literature, you know, like a great, like a Dostoevsky novel or something, that's not philosophy, that's literature.
Right. Okay. So if someone's going to claim that a work of philosophy is not somehow also a work of literature, then you're sort of running what has to be a fool's errand to suppress a metaphorical language in a given text. So everything has to be merely what it is, and refer to supposedly what it merely refers to on the printed page. And I just don't think that's possible. So there's going to be some sort of literary disruption of really any text, unless you're talking about, I don't know, the manual for putting together a lawnmower or something like that. Philosophy needs to tell a story in order to be persuasive. And this is an old distinction, right? It goes back to this problem of rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And in what ways does philosophy play up this persuasiveness, this rhetorical flourish, or this power of rhetoric? And which ways is it suppressed in any given work by any given thinker? And as soon as you open that can of worms, then this distinction between literature and philosophy becomes less and less tenable, at least as I see it.
Okay, Rob, here I want to ask you about the books that you like. Let's just like cut it that way. So like if we both agree that philosophy and literature are at least a fluid, there's a fluidity between them,
Mm-hmm.
if not a distinction. Maybe they're on like a spectrum, and there's interpenetration, and there's certainly incredibly philosophical novels and incredibly literary. I mean, not to reduce literature to the novel, but and vice versa. So what kind of books are you interested in, and what kind of things do you read there in
Um,
Walla Walla, especially on a Sunday when you got the time and the
on,
mood is
a,
right?
on a dreary Sunday. I have read sort of, yeah, so novels from the long 19th century um, is something that I started reading in high school. So I just started reading Dostoevsky novels as a senior, so pretty late. And I couldn't stop reading them. And then I would read, these German novels of the long 19th century, French novels, British novels, there's something about the 19th century novel that was captivating to me. And I think the reason, I didn't figure this out till much later, but I think that the reason why I like them so much and why I could just spend hours and hours living with them is that I I don't think there's another form, literary form, that investigates in so much detail the emotional complexity of human beings. The novel is very well suited and has this potentially unique capacity to delve into characters to such a degree that a measure of complexity can take place that can make it a mirror for the turmoil that the reader feels just in their day-to-day life. And they can discover that, if that makes sense, in the characters of the novel. I think that's the reason why they really speak to me, is just this emotional complexity, this complexity of situation, of negotiations between, self and XYZ. They're really wonderful at that.
Do you feel that, would you go so far as to say that novels do that uniquely? Like, what about if someone said, well, like a film, if you define, I guess it depends on how you define a novel. Like, someone might say there are many other genres that do that, or someone might even like like a dogmatic philosopher might say that a philosophical text about the emotional lives of human beings, or the ethical emotions or something, delves with similar complexity into human emotion. So it's like, what does the novel have that's distinctive or unique in its ability to get at that stuff?
So I think the film is the better corollary, and we can bring the symphony into this too. It has to be a function of time. So you have to be able to stay with a given work for a while. And the novel, even a shorter novel of, let's say 150 pages, or a longer novel of 800 pages, it's very difficult to read one in one sitting. But sort of the longer you,
but not impossible.
It's not impossible.
At least some of the shorter ones. Yeah, like you just run a bath, stay up all night, keep reheating the bath water as you go.
You can be like Charlie Kaufman, and we'll just read a novel in front of the audience as our performance that day. I mean, it can be done. But the point is that you're forced to linger with these works. And a film, okay, yeah, you can disappear into a film. You can linger with that too. But I do think there's something unique about the novel, in that it uses language to position you somewhere in a way that I'm not sure a philosophical text that I've read has done in the same way. And this shows you what, the dogmatism of the position that I'm willing to stake out after I've already told you that there's no meaningful distinction between literature and philosophy. So we're already in the realm of contradictions here.
Yes, that's where I like it.
So the border is porous, but I can't think of a philosophical work that places me somewhere, puts me in a world, and then allows me to explore that space with other people, with the environment, social norms, or whatever that world consists of.
Well, then what do you do with like Nietzsche's Zarathustra? Like, is that a philosophical work or a literary work? And because it seems to place you there. Like, what about these boundary cases?
Well, I don't even.
Can it be both?
I mean, I don't even want to. I don't know if I like the question now because I don't want to enforce some sort of boundary. I guess I was more comfortable with my position was that the boundary is porous, and I don't care if we call something literature, if we call something philosophy. I guess is where I come down on that. Well, but there's a capacity of language, call it a work of literature, call it a work of philosophy, that can place you as a reader in a given space and allow these complications to unfold. But the way that the language is used, and then you can try to specify which one is which. But to me, that's not the real concern. But the way that language is used will have certain effects.
Totally. Well, and the proof is in the pudding. It's the like these. It has an impact, or what am I trying to say here? Like, yeah, there is some phenomenon in that way that language is used in these cases that does something powerful that we can describe. It's describing it requires a degree of depth that we usually just elide over. But more often we try to put labels on these things like literature, philosophy, maybe even religion. I'm not sure if you'd be willing to entertain the porosity between these, or like art, like what is the boundary between all these things? But very often these labels get in the way, and they become, untenable. But maybe we should just see those labels as more matters of convenience. And what we're interested in below the surface is this thing that's happening, damned be, whatever the hell we call it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sympathetic to that. I mean, when I think about the works of literature that speak to me the most, I have these scenes that I come back to. Like there's this, there's this famous German novel, Effi Briest, from Theodor Fontana. And this is later in the 19th century. He wrote that in 1890 or 1895 or something like that. It's pretty late. And sort of the climax of that novel is when the protagonist, Aschenbach, finds that he has to fight a duel, but he doesn't want to. His wife, Effie, has had an affair with Major Krampas, who he had been in the military with earlier on. And he's speaking to another friend who will become his second in the duel. Willersdorf, I think is his name. Willersdorf. I love these names.
That's like his wingman or whatnot, like the guy who holds the pistols for him, or
yeah. So the second, so he will end up being the second in the duel, but first he invites this guy Willersdorf over to his house to attempt to explain to his friend, who will become his second, why he has to fight this duel, even though he doesn't want to. So this is a life or death situation. This is someone who is reluctant. He does not want to off his old friend Major Krampas. And so this is the thing. The affair happened 6.5 years prior. So it's like old news. And he, through...
should just be water under the bridge. I mean,
yes. So for some contingent... so there was this affair. And then by some contingent event, like the kid had run into the desk and then this drawer fell out with a bunch of old letters. He hears about this affair.
That happened to me once, but I mean, it revealed a bunch of strange things. I don't know if you've had a kid pull out your files, knock papers on the floor. Things get revealed that shouldn't be revealed.
Exactly.
You got some secrets in your drawers. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So this guy had some deadbeat skeletons in his deadbeat closet desk, and they came flying out. Then he discovers that this affair had taken place, and he says, I love my wife. I don't want anything to happen with this. I didn't want to know about this, and it doesn't affect my love for her at all. But then he says, I still have to challenge this guy to a duel. And the reason he comes up with is that he's looked his friend in the face. He's like, as soon as I started telling you about this, I had to do it. Like at that point, the line had been crossed, because when you come over for dinner at some point, and I look you in the eye, I'm going to see that you know. When I'm sitting here with my wife and the house guest that we have or whoever, as soon as I look you in the eye, I'm going to know that you know about it, and I can't bear that. I have to fight this duel. And the whole impetus for this, he explains away metaphorically. He says it's because of the societal something. In German, it's die Gesellschaftsetwas.
Okay, Gesellschaftsetwas. Yeah, but what could it be? So yeah, that's nice. So it's like something ambiguous, almost something like unnameable, like a social pressure, maybe, or like social expectation. Yeah. And it's interesting that it seems it's like also kind of in the eyes of like the other man or whatnot. It's like he's like, I'm actually totally cool living this way. Like, and my wife and I have a good relationship now, and it's like that's all in the past. Like, you know, I don't want to have to do this, but you other man, in your eye, like you know, there's like it's like the male gaze like turns back upon you. Maybe it's like honor or whatnot, like amongst men. So this sense of maybe his like masculinity demanded that he stand up or something, or I don't know. Do you feel like there's that element there, or what is that social dimension? I mean, of course, yeah, that's like the male bourgeois society, right? Because when is this novel from?
Yeah, so around very late 1800s, very late 1800s. So it's usually discussed under the rubric of a cult of honor. And his friend Gustav, he says that. He says, "This is Götzendienst," or like, you know, we have to appease this this god. You know, we have to this idol, as long as it is in effect. So he thinks he doesn't have a choice at all. But I like this whole theatrical dimension of it, where it's about gazes. It's about looking someone in the eye and not being able to not see what's there. And the friend agrees with him. He doesn't want to agree either. They're both reluctant, and he says, "Damn it, I can't believe that you're right, but you are. Like, if you looked at me and I knew, then you'd be diminished in my eyes." So he does not want to see this reflection of this diminishment that takes place, even though they both disagree with it. And that sort of social drama, this need of playing a role in your life, even a reluctant one, that's what they call the Gesellschaftsetwas. And, you know, that's the magic of literature to me, because I mean, we're describing the situation, and a work of well, here we go again, you know, drawing lines or whatever. So a different kind of text would approach these questions a different way, and they would make whatever propositional statement that you have to make in order to get to these sticky issues. But being placed there, it's very powerful. Anyway, good book. Go read it.
Yes. Yeah, and it seems to me like, I mean, that's really incredible how you and even in your narrating of the story, you can place us there. It's like the power can be you know, like condensed and things, but like that, but there it's being placed there, it seems, but also not being forced to make up your mind about how you feel about it. Like often, you know, it also does it seems almost inherently to leave some room for you to sketch it out or fill in the gaps of what exactly it might mean, and to connect it to your own life. Or so maybe there's like some moral ambiguity there. Maybe that's just the case with good literature, placing you there. Because I'm trying to think, you know, in philosophy, we have like thought experiments, different like dilemmas and things, and often in particular in ethics or in practical philosophy, where the idea is to, you know, imagine this scenario, you know, like the trolley problem is probably the most famous one. There's like a bunch of people strapped down onto some railroad tracks down below, and there's a train that's coming at them, or a trolley that will crush into them and kill them, and someone has the decision whether to divert the train, but it'll end up killing fewer people or whatnot. And, you know, so they try to put you there in these sort of cases, you know. And there's that example is always so bizarre though, because it's just like something that would never.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess someone should let people know if this has actually ever happened. It would be horrible if so. I mean, it's conceivable, but nonetheless, it's so. But what that also does is that, in a way, it invites you to make a judgment and be like, this is the right thing or this is not for this reason. Whereas I feel like literature places you there, at least some literature or most, maybe the good literature places you there, but doesn't really compel you in the same way. What would you agree with that?
Well, this sounds like Raskolnikov. This sounds like Crime and Punishment, right? How much evil do you have to do to do some good? This is the way that Raskolnikov tries to justify when he kills the landlady or whoever it is, or the pawnbroker.
Yes.
I don't know, but that part of it. That part of it's not important to me. Well, the reason why I love that novel is because you get a window into the complicated thoughts that he has afterwards, and just the physiological reaction, and not being able to live with himself, all the irrationality that comes out just from having made a decision that he might have regretted or that he wasn't very comfortable with in the first place. But whatever the actual decision was, it doesn't matter to me as much as just this sense of being uncomfortable, just being very, very uncomfortable from day to day. That's why I enjoy that novel, and it's just a grotesque. It's just a grotesque work. I mean, it's all those Dostoevsky novels are, wonderful.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I haven't read a Dostoevsky work in some years, but I did, in maybe in my late teens, early 20s, which is I feel when many people encounter that stuff. Maybe I got lucky in high school to be, and I do remember Crime and Punishment. That's the Dostoevsky novel, right? Or is that the Foucault book? Discipline and Punish, Crime and Punishment.
Discipline and Punishment.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. See, and then they blend in your mind. But yes, with that grittiness, with like how, describing kind of his sweatiness and his, just as the days goes on and the moral weight and guilt of the crime weighs on him more and more, and he becomes more and more paranoid, and you really sense it. And for like hundreds of pages, you continue with him as he struggles with this. And it's pretty incredible that, just thinking about it that way, that we want to continue sticking with him in that case. Like, we're compelled in a way to, even though it is horribly uncomfortable and it's like a painful experience that he's going through, it still makes for like gripping literature, I suppose. I don't know. What about that? Like the genre, like what's your view of, does literature have to be like syrupy? Or like, what about that style of literature? Like, does it have to taste sweet going down, or is there more of a like a super spicy, even like a jagged literature?
Yeah, there is a jagged literature, and I don't appreciate it nearly as much. I read some Hemingway, for example, over break. I was in the Bahamas, so I thought that'd be a good excuse to read some Hemingway. And
what did you read?
Oh, what did I read? Isle in the Stream or something like that. It was posthumously published, and then To Have or To Have Not, or To Have and To Have Not. So I read both of those works, and they're spiky.
Okay.
And when I say spiky, the sentences are spiky, right? It's very short sentences, very abrupt. It's got this man shit, like, oh, reel in the marlin, son, and don't care if your feet get bloody as they rub up against the side of the boat when you're doing it, and come on, be a man, boy. I mean, whatever. But mostly it's the sentences that are incredibly spiky. And I always tell people that plots don't actually matter. Plots don't actually matter. It's just like, whatever story the work decides to tell, if they can place you there, then that's usually a pretty good story. But I found myself rebelling against a lot of what was going on in that novel, because I like my literature, I don't know if I'd say syrupy, but thick. Doesn't have to be sweet. It doesn't have to be a sweet syrup. I mean, maybe it can be sappy too, but in the sense of sap. I want to get I want to get stuck there. I want to be like the fly in the amber, you know, that they dig out from the beginning of Jurassic Park. You know, I want to be like in the
just right in there. Nice, very good. You're like DNA preserved in your blood, so that you can reanimate the species you feasted on.
Yes,
many millennia in the future. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, but it's a matter of taste, I suppose.
Well, that's what people say. Yeah, sure. But I mean, that's a conversation we had too. I argue with a lot of people about the role of taste in art, and I like to suppress the role of taste. And maybe, you know, when I say that I like to be, you know, ensnared in sap, maybe that is taste, but there's definitely a discussion to be had about the role of subjectivity and subjective judgment when it comes to works of art as such. And at that level, I'm more of the opinion that I won't say it's objective, but it's not subjective. I don't think that art is a at some level it's not subjective. It's not just like, oh, some people like this and other people like that. I don't believe that. You know, when you go to a concert and everyone raises their hands at the same time, that's not subjectivity. There's something going on there that you've lost control. You are not making the decisions anymore. You are part of the work, and I don't think there's anything subjective about that. But as far as, you know, preferring sappy literature to spiky literature, that might be subjective.
Rob, I want to ask you a question about something that I have long thought that you and I have in common. Not necessarily that one maybe wouldn't suspect unless you were one of us, but I know that you like to wear vintage clothing, like used clothing. You once you find some items that you like, you stick with them over time.
Okay, that's true. That's certainly true. Now, the first part is not true. I don't go out of my way to wear vintage clothing. But I do like old things, and once I find something, I'm a creature of habit. I'd rather just get the same thing again, which is usually not possible.
Yeah, because it's like a one-of-a-kind item.
No, it's because the world moves on.
That's right.
You know, this is a shirt that I've liked for, you know, 5 years, and then it starts getting all tattered, and then I just would rather just have the same shirt because I don't want to think about clearly. You know, like I don't want to think about my clothes clearly.
No, I mean, you got to look that works, you know, for you. And it's like Albert Einstein, right? Just had one outfit. Then you don't have to think about it. You know, you can put
it's very kind of you to it's very kind of you to say that. Okay, sorry, I interrupted you. Finish your thought.
No. Yes. In terms of wardrobe, in terms of maybe appreciation for old things and a certain style and a simplicity, this is maybe like a matter of way of life. And then in terms of not having too many items of clothing, but focusing on the necessities. Like, I guess my question is maybe about asceticism. Let's put it that way. Like, what's your view, or conversely about appreciation for old things? Because I know you also appreciate antiques and old items of things, but maybe correct me if I'm wrong there. How you feeling?
It's like you don't know me at all. Who is this man? We knew each other. Antiques? I mean, I have some like old wooden dishes that my grandmother gave me, and she told me they were antiques, so I believed her.
Well, when you were last out visiting here, you purchased an antique drawing. So you visited us here in Stuttgart, and you purchased
shit's everywhere. It's Germany.
An antique drawing of a plum press, I believe, or an apricot press.
yeah, some kind of cider mill type
Yes.
thing.
So, right. Okay. So you say you are not that attached to the past in terms of your material life, even though in
Well,
terms of, yeah.
I'm attached to the past in terms of my cultural life.
Okay.
Possessions, whatever possessions I have, I just try to get them as inexpensively as possible. But and I don't have very many clothes. That's true. I'd be embarrassed to say what the state of my wardrobe is. But yeah, culturally speaking, I enjoy old things. I feel no obligation to stay current about cultural matters.
Uh-huh.
Uh, aesthetic matters, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Insofar as, and then what are some of your favorite periods of the past, I suppose, that you identify with culturally? Because I mean it sincerely, like, you and I both, you mentioned literature of the long 19th century. And, like in my work in philosophy and a lot of the literature that I've read has been around, like the Enlightenment era and things like this. But there are certain periods of time. Maybe it's weird. It's like that one does identify with the past in this sort of way, culturally, maybe, or aesthetically. Like, what are some of those periods for you, and like, why do they have that appeal for you?
Okay. No, it's interesting. So yeah, we're both interested in the period right around 1800, among other things. It sounds like, and I am confident that if you take me and you transplant me back to 1800, I would be miserable. I would be a miserable human being. There'd be all these sounds that I don't want to hear out on the street. Just sort of the town square, people shouting, yelling to one another. I don't want to hear these things. There'd be smells that I don't want to smell. And there'd be very few ways to escape that horror. There would be no portable music device. You wouldn't have headphones.
I mean, some people might have like a little guitar walking around, or a horn.
I don't want to hear them. Yeah, I don't want to hear them. That would just be part of the things that I'd rather not hear. And so there's no question I would just be a miserable. If you take me and this ridiculous experiment, if I was living in 1800 as myself, I would be absolutely miserable. But I like, the reason I like older things and is just because I want a buffer. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't just want someone to hand me a book and then say, oh, you're going to love this. It's the new book. I was like, there's nothing for me there. It might be great, but what? Just because it's the new book? So I like reading canonical works, which is not to say that they shouldn't be questioned, which is not to say that there's not more of the past to be discovered, right? I mean, that's totally all true. I want like 1 million people to read something before I read it. I want to read things that there's some general consensus that these are just the best.
Yeah, kind of trust like other human judgment that has accrued over time.
And I feel the same way about movies. I'd rather watch a good movie 20 times than a bad movie. If I turn on a movie and if I can tell after the first minute, and you can usually tell pretty early on if it's just, depending on how it's made and just the general choices that are being made, you can usually find out really quick if the rest of it's going to be good. I'll just shut it off. I'd rather watch one of my tried and true things. So I'm very stubborn when it comes to that kind of thing. Very stuck in my ways.
Yeah, but if it works, or if it's not broke, don't fix it. There's something to be said. I agree with you about the films. It drives my partner nuts because I really always prefer to watch old films. Just if chosen, like we have a subscription to the Criterion Collection, this like streaming service that's just like classic films. And one of the criteria that I like is that I prefer if all the cast and like the director and such, and if possible even the producers, are all deceased. So if it's like everybody involved in the film's like dead, they're not in the world anymore, then for me, I enjoy that film more than I do watching a contemporary film. And especially I hate films unless they're kids films and I'm there with my kids, like an animated film. I can kind of just accept that and go with it. But contemporary films, they just feel so ideological to me often, even if people have the best intentions. I just can't like get that much distance from contemporary things to actually enjoy it. So it's ironically I can get more. It's like the distance helps me of the previous, let's say like a black and white noir film from the 40s or something. Like watching that, I can somehow, even though it's further and I know it's from this like dead era, I can connect with it more directly, and it's actually, it feels more honest to me in a way. Yeah.
I would agree. I don't need to watch things from the 40s, but if I feel like
you like some Chaplin, right? Like, or Fritz Lang. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. Modern Times. Sure. I like Fritz Lang.
Nosferatu. I don't know if you've ever gone as Nosferatu for Halloween.
No. Although someone showed me a picture of me like one summer, and I was so pale. I was like, I probably could make. At one point, when I was either an undergraduate or maybe an MA student in Montana, someone quoted this back to me. Apparently, at one time, I said that the only difference it makes if the sun is shining is whether I read with the window shade open or not. And they said, well, that's a really depressing thing. And I was like, but the books are good. Anyway, no, I have not gone to Halloween's Nosferatu, but I like watching typically older things, so not dealing with the current historical moment that I'm in, because I don't like the feeling of being pandered to. So you referenced this in terms of sort of ideological pressure. So if I sense that that's going on, that has become sort of the a guiding principle of a work of art, then I tend to rebel against such things. And that's a long-standing debate concerning, the interpenetration, to use a word that you used, of art of
everybody uses that word, right? Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, sure. One day I'm going to interpenetrate my cereal and the milk. So if you watch a movie or you read a book from a different time, then you're less likely to encounter that sort of coercion. Then you're experiencing something that's different. So you can't identify with all of it, but the goal then would be that since the coercive element is gone, then another form of coercion can exert itself, namely the one of absorption.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that one's not so bad, like at the end of the day. I mean, yeah, you mentioned with sinking into the amber, right?
And when my eyes integrate with the screen, then it's a magical moment.
So, yes.
Are we gonna have to bleep this? No, sorry.
No. No. I think this podcast we can say motherfucking shit. At least.
Well, I'm not just gonna swear for this like some people I know.
So why not? It's human language. Right? It's like language is expressive. Language has power. So I want to ask you more about the history of the novel. And I'm interested, where do you see the beginning of that history? Like, what for you is the first novel? Sometimes people say Don Quixote, and I love Don Quixote. I don't know. I assume you do as well. Just seeing you nod there. But but I've heard like some people say maybe Grimmelshausen, like Simplicianus or whatnot, from a bit before. Simplicissimus. Okay, yes. So and you could even go further back. It depends on, and then if you're looking at non-Western novels like The Tale of Genji in Japan, I think is even earlier. But where do you see this tradition beginning, and out of what does it emerge?
So I don't have a lot to say about the novels that or the proto novels that you've referenced, or exactly where the roots of it are. For me, where I start with the novel is with Goethe. So Wilhelm Meister's apprenticeship, Wilhelm Meister's Lehrjahre, and Wanderjahre and whatever, which is not a great novel.
So but you don't see Sorrows of Young Werther or like some of these earlier works as a novel? Is it only with that work that Goethe like?
We're just sort of, this goes back to the border policing and whatever. What's going to be a novel, what's not going to be a novel. So the epistolary work, the Sorrows of Young Werther, brilliant text. But so I have sort of I'm sort of stuck in this teleological viewpoint where I just see everything leading up to the realist novels. I guess I'm too influenced by Auerbach, the literary critic Erich Auerbach, and that's really where things take off for me. So
with Wilhelm Meister's Lehrjahre,
Wilhelm Meister's Lehrjahre, and this was a huge deal at the time. Culturally speaking, this was just a massive phenomenon. Who is it? One of the Schlegel brothers said that the three most important things that happened in his lifetime were the French Revolution, Fichte's philosophy, and then publishing of Wilhelm Meister's Lehrjahre. So this was a really massive event. And then you had the romantic critique of that novel, which I'm very sympathetic to, meaning it's too prosaic. They said, you can't really disappear into it. It doesn't uncover any of the mysteries of life, or doesn't explore them enough. So then I enjoyed reading the romantic novels, especially Novalis, Heinrich von Ofterdingen, as sort of a counterweight to Goethe novels. But then it just keeps getting better and better in the 19th century. Stifter, Adalbert Stifter.
I haven't read a Stifter.
The most boring German language writer ever is how he's known. And to me, he's just one of the most wonderfully captivating writers you'd ever come across, because nothing happens. It's all description. And it's like just the language and the world that he can place you in, and his use of repetition. Just going on a walk and noticing the landmarks, and then you come back and you can see them again, but maybe things have slightly changed. It's really wonderful, and so that's what does it for me. I mean, if you read this novel of his, incidentally one of Nietzsche's favorite books, Der Nachtsommer, Indian Summer, massive work, 100 pages, and he'll spend 100 pages just describing a room.
This is Stifter, yeah.
This is Stifter,
yeah. And what year about is that novel from?
Oh,
place it in the 19th century.
I don't know, 1850, something like that.
Okay. So many,
well,
is it kind of like a Proust-like in that regard, like a remembrance of things past, like which also spends a lot of time like unpacking a single event, or like how do you see it going on in terms of this type of realist mid-19th century description?
Yeah, so Proust, which, disclaimer, I have not read all 7 volumes or whatever it is.
You haven't?
Yeah. In Search of Lost Time. I have them. I've read the first couple. That was years ago. I was actually thinking that might be some good summer reading. Anyway, so that's a mountain still to be climbed. But his am I wrong that his major device was involuntary memory? So
yes,
right. You bite into the wafer, the cookie, whatever the heck it is. You smell the tea at the beginning, and then your whole life kind of, these memories occur to you, and then that is the driving force of the narrative.
Yeah, there's something involuntary about it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, involuntary memory. So the writer that did that in German would be Theodor Storm, who is another poetic realist writer. He lived in the North. So a lot of his stories are like that, where, there's a short, it's a novella really called Immensee. And this old man comes back to the town where he grew up, and he sees a photo in a room, and then everything comes back to him. And it's a marvelous device, as you know, in the sense that memory is a marvel, provided that it's involuntary. Have you read Minima Moralia? Have you read that Adorno text?
Yeah, I have. Well, I shouldn't say I've read it so far as I've kind of scanned through it, looking for things that are relevant to things I've been doing at various points. I love the aphoristic style of that text, and there's something in there on zoos, like the ethics of zoos and yeah, that I really like that section, and I've used that in a couple of things. But what about Minima Moralia do you see connected to this?
Yeah, so there's an aphorism about involuntary memory. And it says that I think about this one a lot. Actually, when I was thinking about what I should do to prepare for this conversation, and I decided that it would be wrong to prepare, which is probably all too evident in the things that I've been saying. It's like,
no. I'm against preparation. This is like a preparation-free space.
Yeah, right. No prep.
Unless we're talking about preparation H. But no, that's a bad joke.
Okay. So he says that memory is protected by a layer of forgetfulness. So the memories that are protected by a layer of oblivion are in danger like everything else that's alive. So meaning that they may not occur to you. You don't have these memories at your disposal like you do a record in your collection or a photo in your album. But at the right moment, you can only hope, they'll come back. And so those are like what he would call them, the living memories. The other memories, the collector's item, the thing that you're trying to keep in your head, more of like the Nietzschean mnemotechnic sort of memory that's like it's drilled into you. So it's less of a memory than something that you just can't forget any longer. So he doesn't think that, well, I mean, we call them not living, and they're then absent from this
with Adorno.
Serendipitous with Adorno, yeah. So they're absent of this serendipitous event of the arrival of the memory occurring with the force that it could recall all of these things in such a in such a rich way. And then there's a danger that if you try to remember something, then all of the edges become distorted of that image, if you will. Like it's just the fact that you're trying so hard to remember it is sort of a misremembrance. You kind of have to fill in the gaps, and you have to make sure it fits into whatever narrative that you find yourself a part of, the story that you tell yourself to make yourself a self. Whereas involuntary memory, it can disrupt everything.
Yes. Well, it makes me think of Freud, who's someone I think that you and I also enjoy, because we've talked about Freud. There's someone who, I think is, when it comes to something like unconscious, involuntary things and the past and repression of the past, perhaps, and the way that memory functions to shape who we are today, like our connection with events of our childhood. And even Freud broaches the idea of like a subconscious memory at the level of the whole human species, that like humans themselves, certain things that happen in prehistory, like the primal parricide. I wrote about this once, like that all like these proto-human apes, the like sons got together, it's very masculine, got together and like killed their abusive father, and then like, but then felt guilty about it later and started worshiping his memory like a god, and that's where God came from, and the concept of law and all that. But that these memories, on some level, like memory is incredibly important individually and socially. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, and maybe also just as a person, like, I know you grew up in Montana. Correct me if I'm wrong. You grew up in Montana. You live in Washington. We met in Oregon. Like, you've always struck me as like a Northwest dude, like a Rocky Mountain Northwest dude. Like, because I grew up in California and then Colorado, but I appreciate that about you. You know, I kind of imagine you like a cowboy out there, or like walking the ranch up on the, you know, the mountains, the open meadows and whatnot. And so like, how does maybe memory connect with that for you?
Okay, I don't know if I can tie all these strands together. I'm fascinated by that concept in Freud, not necessarily the patricide that comes at the end of Totem Taboo, but I'm fascinated by this idea that the inability to suppress prehistory as a modern being, that the primitive is not something that's locked away in time. It's what we remain. I just think that that's just a fundamental insight of psychoanalysis and of modernism in the early decades of the 20th century in general. So that idea is always with me. You know, looking at life as a series of rituals, a series of attempts to keep the primal fear at bay. All that appeals to me a lot. Now, whether or not you have to believe in the transmigration of souls to hold those opinions, I'm not sure. But critics of Freud will point to very severe limitations and problems with holding such views. But yeah, the primal Montana landscape. You know, when I'm out on the field, David, and when I have my piece of hay in between my teeth, you know, and I'm chewing it around.
Yeah,
when I can smell the dung in the field there.
Yeah. Multi-sensory experience.
There you go. Then I know I'm at home, and I can't wait to saddle on up and ride off to work. No, I'm not a typical Montanan at all. I've never shot a gun. I don't even think I've ever held a gun.
Okay.
So when you picture
and
Montana,
that's pretty atypical in Montana.
Well, there's a lot of hunters in Montana. Ranchers, but also people you'd find in a lot of other states. You know, I don't know how much I identify with the caricature of Montana. I'm not even that outdoorsy. You know, like I don't go out and climb a mountain every weekend. That's another sort of Montana trope. You have people that go to the national park and you know, they're got their bear spray ready and everything. And I do that once or twice a year. But I like the idea. I like the idea of having mountains around me.
Yes.
I like being in a valley and being able to see the rocks, being able to see the trees and have something on the horizon that is not just sky and the tops of buildings. So when I'm not in the valley where I grew up in Montana, I miss those things. Now I can see mountains outside of my window here in Walla Walla, Washington, but they're small and they're not all around me. And the worst was when I was living in Michigan. Nothing against Michigan. Michigan's a beautiful state, but I was in the suburbs. And I just saw buildings and parking lots and flagpoles. I'm comforted by, you know, the warm embrace of the mountains. So I don't know if that's like an archaic memory that's coming if you could do a Freudian reading of that, being like, oh, I just want to crawl back into the womb of Mother Nature. I mean, all of that is fair game. But you might have a similar idea of growing up in Colorado, right? Do you feel the same way?
I mean, I do with, I was definitely relating to what you were saying with regards to the mountains there. I mean, yeah, growing up in the Denver area in Littleton, where I grew up, and then having lived in Denver, and anybody who lives on the Front Range, you always have those mountains in view to some extent, unless you're like in a, you know, super urbanized part of the city, but that would be strange. You could always look at them and then you know that that's west. So since it's so, you know, it just runs north south. So it's actually very good for one's developing of like a compass. And I think that helped me you know, when I was like a teenager learning to drive and then navigating the city. Something about having those mountains there always stuck with me on some level. And now, you know, even living here in Stuttgart, wherever I go, I kind of think of things in a north, south, east, west way. And the mountains are almost there, like a shadow memory of them, you know, of they're out to the west. So I think that sort of those like orientational features of the environment are very important. And I really like thinking about that. Here in Stuttgart, where it's a beautiful city too. I know you've been, and you should come back. And one of the distinctive things are the valleys. It's you know, in distinction from Berlin or a lot of northern German places, or even Munich, that's just on much flatter land. Stuttgart's on these rolling vineyard hills, and it's very hilly. There's a lot of staircases. It makes it difficult to bike through in certain respects, but it's very nice that you always have this geography too. But it's a bit more confusing. That's certainly the case than it is in Denver, because those little hills are all over the place. I want to ask you a question related to that, which is about Bigfoot. So, and in Montana and in Washington. Have you ever?
Yeah, sure.
Have you ever ran across any traces of Bigfoot footprints? Maybe even glimpsed some fur?
I have not personally. The only traces of Bigfoot that I run into regularly are, you know, their image on the sides of tote bags or on postcards being sold, you know, a local bookstore, gift shop, or something like that. But I have had the experience of being in the woods. And, you know, you talk about the mountains being a force of orientation, but as soon as you get into those woods, it is very easy to get lost. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of respect for those wild areas. So I was going mushroom hunting with a friend of mine, and you know, this crazy shit growing all over the place in the forest. And,
this is there in Washington or back in Montana?
Well, this is actually in Oregon. Okay. But you could have the same experience in a wilderness area in any of these states. Yeah. And I was separated from my friend. I didn't know quite where he was, but we would just sort of like yell. We had this vulgar thing that we would yell at each other, and then we have a vulgar answer, and that's how we would jokingly keep track of where we are. I can't tell you what we said, but sure. There was all of a sudden I heard this rustling, and I was just convinced that it doesn't take much to scare me out there. I'm an excitable guy. I'm a suggestible person. I'm very gullible. So I am just primed to be scared in the woods. I heard a rustling, and I was just convinced there was a bear out there. Okay. I was just ready. Okay, there's a bear, and I'm going to have some sort of life and death confrontation.
Was it pretty loud rustling? Was it like, so it couldn't have been like a squirrel, or like the amount of rustling suggested that it was a large creature?
The amount of rustling suggested that it was something it was taking footsteps that I could discern. Mm-hmm. So yeah, not like a squirrel. It turns out, of course, it was just another human being. You know, it was just another beast like us out there gathering mushrooms. But I was legit afraid, and I found, you know, my buddy there, and I was like, "What's going on?" And of course, he was willing to entertain some of my paranoia, but no, it was just another mushroom, a friendly mushroom hunter out there with his bucket. But no, have you? Why do you ask? Have you encountered Bigfoot? You know, there's a lot of interest in Bigfoot in all of these states, particularly Washington and Oregon. Mm-hmm. And there are those who say that they have seen at least traces of this creature.
Yes. Yeah, I it's like I want to believe. That's like part of the difficulty. Like I want to believe, and I like because like I like thinking about Linnaeus. You know, like mid 18th century Swedish taxonomist, gave us binomial nomenclature and coined Homo sapiens as our species name, with himself as the example. But Linnaeus had these like different human categories and some sort of like paradoxical creatures that may exist still on his taxonomical charts. And there's something also thinking about that older time back in the past, like when something like Bigfoot, I think you could just believe that it was there. And in a sense, we just didn't know enough of the world, all the wonders and the things that were hidden around. Unicorns, dragons, all sorts of things. Like, I think it kind of sucks that we can't believe in those things, or that in a way, when you become an adult, or at least usually when you shift from childhood to adult, you're kind of forced to dispense with these ideas. So it's like Bigfoot's kind of like the Santa Claus of that in a certain sense. Like, people don't want to give up believing. That's kind of how I feel about it. But
don't stop believing, Dave. Don't stop believing.
No.
I identify with your nostalgia for mystery and for the inexplainable. I mean, that's, I'm with you there. I think
we've gone too far today.
I don't think I don't believe in extraterrestrials, not in the way they show up in the movies. I mean, there could be life out there, but I don't think that there's a bunch of UFOs visiting in the United States or any other country, the Earth in general. I don't believe in Bigfoot. All the megafauna was basically killed off quite a while ago. Mm-hmm. But I believe in a secular form of the miraculous. That might be paradoxical. I think that there are miracles, but I think that they're just, a miracle to me is just having someone smile at you at the right moment. So I believe in miracles insofar as that they are unexpected moments that come in a time of need. To me, that's the miracle. So maybe that's why I'm drawn to, these bourgeois works of the long 19th century that, particularly these poetic realist texts that dwell on these little moments. That's my kind of miracle. But if you ever want to go searching for Bigfoot, I'd be interested.
Yes. Yeah. Now, next time I'm out there, and maybe next time you're here, we could go searching. I mean, who's to say that there's not Bigfoot here in the Black Forest or in the Swabian Forest? At least, who's to say? There's this idea, the wild man, this, like the wilde man. It's like more of a medieval trope in a lot of heraldry and things in parts of continental Europe. And I like going around villages and looking at fountains and occasionally seeing a wild man here. And so that's almost like a sense of Bigfoot, right? It's like, it's usually a man, although I guess there are men and women, and both have been depicted, but it's this idea that there are out there human-like creatures who are human in every anatomical sense, except they're also covered in fur. They're very furry, and they live in the forest. But they have a certain nobility to them. They have they carry around their staffs. They're kind of like savage in a way, but almost in like a positive way. I don't know. What have you ever thought about this like wild man idea? I don't know if that survived into modernity very much.
Well, is this the Rousseauian sort of idea of the noble savage? Is that what you're talking about, or is this something else?
Yeah, this is even earlier. It's I'd say it's I'll have to return to this in a future podcast, perhaps, if there's interest in that. But like a medieval trope in Europe of forest-dwelling human beings who are hairy and use sticks as their implements, and who are depicted in art and tapestries and statues, and almost have like a sort of charm to them. And it's a little unclear whether they're seen to be, is this like a unicorn or not? And maybe like the epistemic truthfulness status of it is uncertain, but they're interesting. Right. They're these charming figures. So I don't know, thinking about that with Bigfoot, thinking about the wild, thinking about humans outside of the city, thinking about humans in a natural space and kind of plucked out from where we live and placed there. I like Robinson Crusoe. I don't know if you like that novel.
Yeah. I don't think I've even read the whole thing, but I'm familiar with the the basic outlines. Yeah, that speaks to me. I think it's okay to have lore.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's okay that it can be epistemologically sort of unsettled. There are elves in Iceland, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my host was an exchange student in Iceland back when she was a teenager, and my German host sister. So in Iceland, apparently you will meet people who, at least in a tongue-in-cheek way, say that they have encountered elves, or they'll speak about elves, that might be the work of the elves, and well, who knows if they're there or not. So yeah, they have this this elf lore up there that is very prevalent, and I think that's part of local charm. I don't think there are elves wandering around the wild spaces of Iceland, but who knows? Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly the type of stuff that like a global media landscape, when everything's kind of nationalized, and a lot of that kind of local texture tends to get dissolved away, or but connecting with that idea of the secular miraculous, I like that. Maybe that's a good place for us to shift into our last question, Rob. So this is like, what sort of since you do believe in magic, the magic of a kind person's smile, which I like, and I think that's a good description of magic. It makes me think of Magic Johnson, who always had when I was growing up in Southern California, like Magic and the Lakers and Magic's smile were a big part of my childhood in a weird way, even though I never played basketball or really any other sports. But
he's a huge cultural figure, great ball player.
What's that? Yeah,
he was a huge cultural figure, and when we were growing up, and a fantastic ball player.
Yes, and I always preferred Magic Johnson to Michael Jordan, but I think that I'm not sure if you had a view of that.
All right, so this is the era of sports that I'm familiar with, and I still don't have a view. That's when I actually watched a bunch of sports all the time. I was more of a John Stockton guy. Wasn't he the shorter guy who shot a bunch of threes? I preferred that. I liked it that you can be short and you can still be good at basketball, and you just have to be like a precision sort of player. And that's basically the game now, right? I mean, you're just trying to shoot as many threes as you can.
Yes. Yeah, as far as I understand. So, well, I'm going to ask you, what are 3 magical recommendations that you would have for books, films, or albums that for you have some of that magic?
Some talisman. Okay, well, music. Well, I don't think that these are going to be surprising choices. I mean, the most magical piece of music to me, which is the one that I think comprehends me the most uncannily accurate representation of something that I've always wanted music to be, and then all of a sudden it happened. Mahler's Ninth Symphony. I just think it's the most phenomenal piece of music ever written. I can't imagine a greater piece of music than that. Okay, but I can't give a full account of the Ninth Symphony, but that would be the musical selection.
Yes.
As far as film, maybe Apocalypse Now. Very well known Francis Ford Coppola film about Vietnam and the American engagement in Vietnam. And it just doesn't get any better than Marlon Brando saying, "Oh, the horror." Devastatingly magical. And the book recommendation?
Yeah. Then you got all 3 genres there. I like that.
I'd pick up Adalbert Stifter's novella from his collection, Many Colored Stones, Bunte Steine, Kalkstein, Limestone. It's got one of my favorite passages in all of literature, where there's 2 men who just sit in a house in silence as a storm gathers, and then blows by, and the windows get blackened, and it's a horrible storm. It's as if the walls are going to come crashing down, and they just sit there in silence, just respecting that moment.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation with
Rob Mottram.
The Deadbeat Philosophy Podcast is a co-production of Deadbeat Media and the Museum Hegel-Haus Stuttgart. For more Deadbeat content and to chip in to keep the channel going, check us out at deadbeatphilosophy.substack.com. For more about the Museum Hegel-Haus, check out hegelhaus.de. That's HEGEL-HAUS.de. Adios and auf Wiedersehen.